Hey, what's up, guys? NBA season, it is here. It is beginning. It's Tuesday. Christmas is upon us almost. Crazy, man. The year's over. We've done it, Drew. We've made it through this year. You ready for some
Doesn't
NBA?
doesn't feel like we've made it through this year. I'll be honest. I feel like I got a long way to go still. But I am ready for some NBA. I'm super excited to have the NBA back, and just honestly been grinding minutes projections pretty much the last 48 hours of my life, which is where I feel at home. So things are good. Things are good.
Yeah, I'll tell a sad story. My spreadsheet that I've been using the entire time I've played DFS, I built it, like the core of it, back in like 2012 or 13, yeah, probably 12 or 13. So it had like baselines. A lot of it was built around Basketball Monster because that's all there was back then. And Basketball Monster is not doing DFS anymore. And I realized that it was probably easier just to start completely over with my spreadsheet. So that has not been very fun. But I made a lot of progress and I got rid of a lot of stuff that I wasn't using anymore. And I think the spreadsheet's gonna work better and it's just much simpler. Reworking a dashboard, which I'm going to build on Establish a Run. So I'm excited about that. I made some progress on that today. So look for a dashboard in probably the next week or two on the site, and that'll have the depth charts. It'll combine a lot of stuff: depth charts, minutes, projection, and so you can kind of all see it in one spot. So hopefully you guys will like that. The slate today, eh, it's not great. I think a lot of the differences are going to be made on the fringes with some of these guys that maybe have moved teams and we're not entirely sure about their minutes or their usage. Um, I suppose there are, all the studs are pretty much in play. So you get those right, and then you nail the secondary pieces. But I don't know. I'm not too enthused about it. What's your macro thought on the site or the slate here?
Yeah, it feels like a slate that's a little bit difficult to find ways to differentiate. I would say that one of the ways that, I'm probably going to end up differentiating is it looks like I anticipate that I'll be a little bit lighter on Kevin Durant than the field, just based on kind of where the projections are coming in compared to some of the star players. And I feel like I have pretty good reasons for that. It's a little bit concerning, certainly. But Brooklyn is a team that, is going to play as I said in a tweet yesterday, they played 11 guys in the first half of their preseason dress rehearsal. I think they'll get it down to 10. But even so, I think it would be hard pressed for KD to get up to like the 34-minute range there. And then just, we'll see how the lineup shake out in terms of where the usage comes. But in the preseason, Kyrie's usage came down quite a bit and KD kind of held his own. I don't necessarily expect that to be the case. So maybe there's a little bit of edge there, but really on a two-game slate, there's only on any given team, the most you're going to get of guys that are like truly in play that you feel pretty good about is like 6 or 7. And so on a two-game slate, you just don't have that many guys to pick from. And many teams with these stars, they only have like 3 or 4 guys that are even in play just because the stars soak up so much of the production. So it's the thin slate. The value plays are pretty clear. They've opened up due to some injury issues with Marcus Morris being out tonight, and as a result, you got a slate that's not super exciting. Most of the takes are kind of on the fringe in terms of where you're finding spots to maybe differentiate from the field.
Let's talk a little bit about Kevin Durant because I think it's a little site specific. He's really cheap on FanDuel, and I think he's going to be very heavily on there, especially when you need two power forwards. To me, there are pretty much three power forwards you're choosing from on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I was kind of thinking that Durant might be an okay GPP angle because he's pretty expensive. I mean, he's 9.8K versus 8.5 on FanDuel. You think he's going to be chalky on both sides?
I think he will be chalky on both sides. I think the price gap between him and AD is going to make him a fairly comfortable play on FanDuel. And on FanDuel, I think AD is a slightly better play. I'm expecting AD will hold on to the great blocks and steals, permanent production that he's had throughout his career. And I'm less assured of that with Kevin Durant just coming off of the Achilles. If those the explosive defensive statistics will be there. And then on DraftKings, I think just looking at some of the projected ownership from the Labs guys, and that's a algorithm that's used, which is it's tough to project NBA ownership. This slate is a little bit easier because there's less moving parts, but their projected ownership has Kevin Durant in the 31 to 35 range, and I think all the other stars are right there around 40ish. So it doesn't really spread between the stars, and so we'll see where things come in. But my guess is that um, he's going to be decently owned. I mean, people want to play Kevin Durant, and if you think about like the narratives kind of around the star players that are on the slate, we've had so much talk about LeBron in the context of LeBron resting and LeBron not playing as much and all these things. And so I think that might naturally have people thinking, oh, like Kevin Durant is a better play than LeBron because they're probably going to play at like similar minutes and whatnot. But I think LeBron's teammates, the guys that he's playing with on the floor, are just less likely to soak up usage. And also like Golden State has Brooklyn has this huge implied total on the slate. It's the highest total game. So I think Curry's going to be very very owned. I think that'll be very very clear. But you know Brooklyn's got a team total that's 10 points higher than the Lakers. So I think people are going to definitely want to play KD and Kyrie.
Well, we have LeBron projected as a, I don't know if I want to say significantly, but a better play. Um,
Yeah.
Different positions. And one thing to keep an eye on this year is a lot of the guys' positions have changed, so that throwing everyone for a little bit of a loop. But that's interesting. If LeBron is not going to be owned, and as you're talking through it, and I'm thinking about it, I do think people would rather play Durant than LeBron. So maybe that's kind
Yeah.
of the angle. I think Curry is going to be the most owned. I can say that with a lot of confidence. How would you rank them after him? Kawhi probably is going to get overlooked too. I don't know.
Yeah. I think so. I think people are going to focus on this Brooklyn Golden State game a little bit more. One, it's got the higher total. People always love the totals in NBA, and they gravitate there. And it's got a higher total by 15 points. So I feel pretty strongly that like Curry is going to come in first in ownership, and then my guess would be that Kyrie and KD are pretty close to next. I think Clippers didn't have a particularly good preseason. A lot of people are concerned about the time off in the comparison and time off between these two games. You've got the Lakers and the Clippers who just played playoff games a couple months ago, and you've got Brooklyn and Golden State who've been antsy and like ready to go. And I think that stuff is all like reflected in the total, and so I think it's all taken into account. And we've taken into account like our minutes projection on LeBron is only 31. It's less than what he played in terms of his first half minutes allocation in their dress rehearsal. It's less than what he typically plays in his career, usually project him around 33, 34, 35. And KD is right around where he was in his first half dress rehearsal in the preseason. And so I think LeBron's a pretty good GPP play. And LeBron didn't play a lot in the preseason, but he had a 40% usage rate. So it's not like he was coasting out there in the preseason when he was playing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the minute projection on Durant is probably pretty accurate. I don't think there's much room for upside there. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't. I don't see a lot of upside there. Whereas LeBron, we have him at 31 minutes, and you can see right here he's projected for 5 more points. Like, would it shock you, Drew? This is a nationally televised game, first game of the season. Would it really shock you if LeBron played 35 or 36 minutes? I think I'd be a lot more surprised if Durant played 36 minutes.
Um, I'd be surprised if either one played 36 minutes, but the Brooklyn roster is just deeper. I mean, the thing with Brooklyn is in the preseason when they're playing 11 guys in the first half, they're going to have to show some commitment to cutting guys out if they're going to get the stars minutes that high. And you look at the players that they would be cutting out, like they're already not playing Bruce Brown in the rotation. Luwawu was like that 11th guy, and Steve Nash had some quotes that suggested, I wish we could find more minutes for these guys. And so I just think it's going to be tougher for the Brooklyn guys to get up into the mid 30s unless they start making some tough decisions. And I don't expect that to be the case early. Like, if you look, I've got Jared Allen projected for only 17 minutes. And that's because they were playing a decent bit of Jeff Green at the 5, which I think they might also be able to do in this matchup against Golden State. We'll see what they choose to do. But I've got LeVert only at 22 minutes because he only played like 8 or 9 first half minutes in their dress rehearsal. And so, like, I've got other guys' minutes down, and it's tough to envision KD or Kyrie pushing 34, 35 without without eliminating someone from this rotation in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point on LeBron was this is I know they're going to limit him. We for sure they're going to limit him to start the year, but this is a guy who always has the NBA in his mind, the greater good of the league, and like often will rise up for nationally televised games. So I'm just, and he probably, what he averaged last year, 35, 36 minutes a game. I mean, certainly not
Yeah, I think
31.
I think you. No, 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 no. We're being conservative on
Yeah.
LeBron for sure.
Yeah. So I'm just saying
He
I'm really buying into him as a great GPP play as we talk through it here.
Yeah, 34.6 minutes per game last year for LeBron. That was the lowest minutes per game he's ever averaged in his career, and we're projecting 3 minutes lower, which make like look he's 36 years old or 35 going on 36. Like I don't know how long he can keep doing this. He'll turn 36 in a week, so almost happy birthday to LeBron, December 30th.
All right. Well, we kind of started with the discussion of the guys at the top. We didn't mention Anthony Davis at all, who
Yeah,
is kind of always the case on FanDuel. He's just kind of a lock over there because with the two power forward situation. And we're going to run down each position. I just that's kind of where my mind was at as we rolled into the show, as I was working on lineups before we started. So I'd also say that I think this is not a very good cash game slate. It's like you're going to end up having it decided like Lou Williams versus Serge or something like that, and or just like the punts, Batum, who's going to be really heavily owned and I think a very solid play. But we've gotten projected for 10% usage, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if he plays like 30 minutes and scores like 10 fantasy points. Yeah, so I mean that's kind of where the slate is going to be decided in cash games, and I'm a little bit more interested in GPP angles here because that's what I'll be playing today. All right, before we get into position by position, any other high level thoughts on this slate?
So I walked through top plays, kind of talking about where I think things are fragile and where I think things are really stable. And so just kind of thinking through projections from that standpoint and kind of going team by team really quickly. I would say Golden State, I feel really, really good about Steph's minutes projection, about Andrew Wiggins' minutes projection. Less good about Kelly Oubre and Zach Pascal, Eric Pascal, who I think those two had their minutes a little bit tempered in the preseason. I think some of that was, especially with Pascal, the Warriors were trying to make a tough cut on Juan Toscano Anderson versus I think it was either Mannion or Mulder for like a last roster spot. They ended up signing Toscano Anderson back to a two-way deal. But I think they were showcasing him a little bit to like just get a better look at that situation and make a decision. But that being said, Pascal, who had an ankle injury, I believe it was in the preseason, and Oubre did not play the same type of elevated minutes that Curry and Wiggins played. And Curry and Wiggins were also staggered, and that's the plan. The plan is Curry's going to play the entire first quarter. Wiggins is going to play like the first 6 minutes of the first quarter. Then he's going to get subbed out. Then they're going to bring in Wiggins to lead the second unit. Wiggins is going to have all sorts of usage there. Kelly Oubre is just going to be like a stand-up shooter, a spot-up shooter who just kind of sticks in the corner and runs the break. I don't think he's going to have like a lot of isolation looks. So I think his usage is maybe a little bit suspect as well. And then on Golden State, I would say their bigs are, James Wiseman, we didn't see in the preseason. He's going to start tonight. But I think they're still going to play Marquise Chris and Kevon Looney. And if they do that, it's really hard to play one of those guys at the four. Maybe you could get away with Looney and some of those minutes Durant's at the four because Looney is a pretty good defender. But that's tricky. And so I have none of those centers like really popping from a minutes perspective. But that's a fragile situation where if one guy does emerge, Chris and Weissman have profiles that you would think would be good per minute producers. Brooklyn, we talked about a little bit more in depth. Their minutes projections from a fragility standpoint, LeVert is the guy that I'm really confused on because I really expected him to be in the mid to upper 20s. But he's going to be running that second unit as the point guard. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. So like he's somebody that could make me look silly in terms of where the minutes projection is. But look, they were playing Spencer Dinwiddie and Jeff Green and Landry Shamet and all these guys a lot in 8 to 9 minutes in that first half of the dress rehearsal. I'm projecting 22, so I'm projecting ahead of what the dress rehearsal pace was, but behind where I had him before from the seasonal perspective. That situation's a little shaky. On the Clippers side, some people have asked us, you're not projecting Reggie Jackson. At first, we weren't even projecting him in the rotation. Now I kind of copped out and gave him like half the minutes with Terrence Mann. The Clippers basically have said that they're using the 10th man in their rotation as a matchup driven play between Patrick Patterson, Reggie Jackson, and Terrence Mann. Now they got shifted up in who their 10th man is because of Marcus Morris being out. I think that assures Patrick Patterson of minutes, especially in a matchup against the Lakers, where they need a real big to play up against Anthony Davis a lot, and the Lakers play bigger. On top of that, I think Terrence Mann is a better fit to play against the Lakers because of his defensive prowess, because he's a little bit bigger than Reggie Jackson. So I think Mann is going to be that 10th guy. But I think people that are, I think if you're projecting Reggie Jackson as like he's the pure backup point guard and he's a guy who historically was good point per minute, I don't think you want to do that. I think there's a chance he doesn't even play at all. He played 5 minutes, one rotation in the first half of the last preseason game. He came and subbed in early for Beverly, did a 5-minute rotation, didn't play again. So I'm not so sure how the back end of their rotation works, but I'm really solid on Kawhi and PG. Those guys played good minutes. Lou Williams did not play good minutes in that last dress rehearsal, just 7 minutes in the first half. That was a little bit confusing, so I've got him a little bit lower than I usually would. So like Clippers secondary pieces, a little bit unsure of. I think Serge will play more than Zubats based on some of the preseason rotations as well. And then Lakers stuff, I'm just not sure who starts between Schroeder and Kuzma. I think the minutes are pretty much the same regardless of who starts. I might shift it like a minute. Kuzma started and he just played so much in the preseason. I think they're going to play him mid-20s. And Schroeder, it's taken some time for him to get acclimated, and they have a little bit more depth in the backcourt with Taylor and Horton Tucker's emergence as well. So those would be some of the areas of fragility in the projections. Feel really good about most of the top guys in terms of their minutes projections on this slate. It's more some of these secondary role players and trying to figure out, where the minutes come from.
Yeah, I wanted to hit on Wiseman just briefly because I saw some other sites in the industry had him a little bit higher up. But when you look at it and you break it down, I mean, Chris is going to play, Looney's going to play. I don't know. I don't really ever see him getting into like the mid-20s here. And if you're projecting someone at 20 minutes, then you kind of have to think that there's sometimes where he's playing more than 20 minutes, and I don't really see it. So I think it's wise to show a little caution with Wiseman. And he's probably the other thing people are going to want to play him.
I don't know. He's priced at a point that I don't know if that'll happen. But the thing that I would mention with him is also that Steve Kerr specifically said, like, we're going to play him in short stints to teach him things. So, like, do not be surprised if, like, 2 minutes into the game, he, like, totally misses on a coverage and you get a quick sub and he's out and they're, like, talking him through it on the sidelines. And then, like, 2 minutes later, he subs back in. Like, they explicitly have talked about, like, he doesn't have a lot of playing experience, right? He, like, barely played his 1 year in college. And so I would be shocked if that guy is playing like 8-minute stints at a time. Like, I think it's going to be like 4 stints of 4 minutes is kind of what I'm expecting for Wiseman tonight.
Yep, I'm with you on that. Just seeing some questions in the chat. We'll tackle more of these later. Luke Kennard versus Batum is definitely something we'll talk about. I know some places are a little bit higher than Kennard than us. So I think ultimately Batum's just going to eat a lot of minutes and not be very productive with them. So I think it's okay to go Kennard and GPPs, but we'll talk about that more. So, all right, let's talk about point guards. Steph Curry, like, I think he's the best play on the slate. I would be looking to be overweight him in tournaments. I think he's a lock in cash games. Do you disagree with anything I'm saying?
No, I think, I was messing around with Steph's rates a little bit more just because of some of the notes from Mike Gallagher in the 3-ball, which reminder to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get the 3-ball each and every day for free. It's been awesome, the work Mike's put in on that. But Steph hasn't had the assist rate nearly as high in the preseason. They're using him off the ball a lot more. And so I think you might see the usage rate or the assist rates of some of the secondary Golden State guys splurge a little bit, and Steph's usage rate pump up. And I think, like, when Draymond gets back, this will really be the case. I think Draymond's going to be used as a big time facilitator, and Steph's going to be used as a big time, like, coming off screens and just like making plays off screens left and right. And so I think you're going to get a ton of usage from Steph. I think you're going to get 20 plus shots. The minutes are really good. They got him up to 17 per half, and basically it's like play the entire first, play the entire third, play the last 5 minutes of each half. There's your 34. So that's the target for him. They've talked very explicitly about that. They've played exactly to that in the preseason. So I think he's the guy that you look around at all these stars and you're like, oh, LeBron has to compete with AD and Kawhi has to compete with PG and KD needs to compete with Kyrie. Steph has nobody to compete with from a usage perspective. So I think that's what puts him a little bit apart from the other top guys.
Yeah, as an aside about Draymond, I think it was on Dunked On or something I was listening to in the last day or two. They were noting that, or maybe it was the Hollinger pod. It doesn't matter. They were saying that Draymond's supposedly in really good shape, has lost a bunch of weight. I know he's dealing with something right now, and he had. I think did he have COVID? He had some COVID protocol stuff, and I think that's why he didn't play in the preseason. But I don't know. Just wanted to mention that because if he try, I mean, the thing with Draymond, he's not even on this slate, but just file this one away. If he's going to be trying, he could be very good. And if he's lost some weight, I think that's a good sign. All right, let's move on to Kyrie, who's the second best play here. And he's kind of coming up really, as a cash play, I think, on both sites. And on FanDuel, I don't think I'm overthinking it in cash. I would just go Curry and Kyrie. DraftKings, he's hitting our optimals, and I've got the Fantasy Labs optimals up right here. It's going to be nice to have all these extra tools that we didn't have in the restart with the optimizer and with the projections and all that stuff to share with you guys. So I'm excited about that. And you can see right here, I just ran 10 optimals. Kyrie's in every one of them, and so is Curry. So I don't know. Is he a lock in cash games? What do you think there?
Well, the thing about Kyrie is he's just cheaper than all the other star players, right? Like by a meaningful amount. He's $1,500 cheaper than AD. He's $600 cheaper than Kawhi, 1,100 cheaper than LeBron, 1,300 cheaper than KD, and these guys all project somewhat similarly. So just like on a slate where there's really not a lot of value, just kind of take the extra salary and be able to allocate it to someone else you're a little bit more confident in. I think that's basically what it comes down to with respect to Kyrie. In terms of the matchup, I think Golden State is going to be a team that's probably going to struggle quite a bit defensively. I think if you look at where they might especially struggle, they basically brought in Kelly Oubre to be like their best wing defender. But I don't think they're going to play Oubre on Kyrie. I don't know what they're going to do with Oubre, honestly. Maybe they put him on Kyrie. But anyway, I think point guards going against an opposing rookie center that doesn't have a lot of experience in NBA level pick and roll coverage, I like that. I like that a lot. So I think Kyrie is the better play than KD tonight.
And I guess we're thinking they're going to come in at similar ownership, huh?
That's what Labs has. I think it'll be tilted in Kyrie's direction. I mean, they have Kyrie maybe 10 plus points ahead, but I would guess it's within striking distance. I don't think it'll be like 30-40% different.
So then number 3, I mean, LeBron, he's a good play, and it just seems like he's probably going to get overlooked. I don't know if I'd be playing him at point guard, but you can play him at small forward as well. I believe he's point guard, small forward this year on DraftKings. FanDuel, he remains at small forward. They did slide Durant up to power forward, which kind of changes things a little bit for him. Let's talk about some of the cheaper guys at point guard. You've got Beverly, Dinwiddie, Sweet Lou. I mean, Wanamaker, not really. I think I just kind of need to fill out 5 spots on FanDuel. What do you think about any of these guys? They're all pretty marginal at best, I think.
Yeah, so Dinwiddie is only DraftKings point guard eligible. So the FanDuel pool gets pretty thin pretty quick. It's basically Steph, Kyrie, and then Bev or Lou. Hard to see scenarios where Wanamaker, without insane stocks production, gets there in a way that is impactful in GPPs. And especially when you think through roster construction stuff, Steph and Kyrie are 2 of the better plays on the slate, but they're also they just aren't facing much competition at this position. So I think if you're going beyond these guys, I think Beverly is the guy that's the most interesting to me. He's the cheapest of the Clippers options. He played a little bit more normalized minutes in that last dress rehearsal preseason game that I expected. So I feel a little bit more confident putting him at his usual 25 to 26. Lou, I'm just not sure. And when people are asking about Kennard, right? Like the way I have it is I've had Kennard like kind of impacting Lou a little bit more. And in this matchup, with the size that they need against the Lakers, Batum being the guy that plays a little bit more. And they played Batum so much in the preseason. He played 20 first half minutes in the preseason like dress rehearsal finale. And I think they need that kind of size and length against LeBron and AD in these big Lakers lineups that I think are a little bit tougher for Lou and for Kennard to like kind of make their way. So I have Lou and Kennard kind of eating into each other a little bit tonight for this matchup.
I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. I've got some of the minutes up here for these guys here. I mean, we've got Kennard at 18 and a half. We've got Batum at 30. Although I think you might have ticked that down right before the show, and I just didn't reload
Yeah, I
this.
was debating. I was debating whether to. I mean, I think I'll probably go Kennard to 20 and a half and Batum to 28 just to be a little bit more conservative. But I mean, like I just really I think there's definitely you got to think of this matchup and the size that the Lakers are running out there, and the fact that they played Batum so much more than Kennard in the preseason. Like, why are they doing that? I don't have a good answer. And so, but I gotta believe that means something with regards to the way that they were preparing for the regular season, especially in the context of preparing for a regular season opener when they knew they might not have Marcus Morris. And I think in their regular rotations, Marcus Morris is going to play like 28 minutes a night, I think, normally. So I think Kennard and Lou are fighting for playing time. And that gets into Reggie Jackson's minutes as well. So I think those guys are more guards, and Batum is more of a forward, and they need more of a forward in this matchup against the Lakers.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's just hit Batum while we're talking about him. I mean, I would not fade him in cash games. I'm trying to determine how to handle him in tournaments. What are you doing with him?
I don't know yet because I haven't run my stuff yet. I'm just a little bit behind today. My guess is that if he comes in at so like these are also like site differences too, right? Like I think there's more paths where you can talk about Batum not hitting the well, I'm trying to think. Like on FanDuel, you can get the 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 good production from cheap guys quickly in limited minutes if they get stocks, if they get steals and blocks, because the scoring system so heavily rewards it. So sometimes you can get a guy that plays like 18 minutes and generates like 22 FanDuel points just because he had 3 or 4 steals and blocks in that time. And so I think, looking at the projected ownership stuff, Lab's projected ownership looks really, really light on Batum. So I'm a little bit hesitant. But you also told me like we're higher than Batum, higher than the market on Batum. Like, so what do you think? Like, what do you think his ownership is going to come in at? I think if his ownership is coming in at like 20 to 30, I'm probably going to be over that. But if it's coming in at 50 to 60, then I don't want to be over that. You know what I mean? So I'm probably going to play him in that like 40 range is my guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good handle. I think people are
He's
most.
he's not somebody like I don't. To me, he's not somebody that people would be excited to play.
I mean, come on. He was a stud a couple years ago.
He was, but it's been a minute since he was, and I don't think people are going to be as confident. Like the questions we're getting on Kennard, the questions I was getting on Reggie Jackson. I don't think people are going to be as confident in his minutes as I seem to be, and
Yeah.
maybe I'm the idiot.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong on
Well,
this,
and Gallagher
but
seemed pretty bullish on his minutes too.
so I'm probably going to be over the field on him, and
Okay.
it all feels gross.
It is pretty gross. He's
Welcome to a
hitting.
2 game slate.
Let's see here. He's hitting. I ran 33 lineups here, and he's hitting 90% on FanDuel. I would just play him on FanDuel. I think small forward is pretty weak there. Um, let's circle back to before we get more into small forward there. Sorry guys, we're a little bit all over the place, but it's just we're trying to dive deep since it's just a 2 game slate. Shooting guard, Paul George is the best. Do you want to pay up for Paul George today? My lean is probably not just based on roster construction, but I think he's a pretty good play. And it so works out that you want to play him, that's fine. And really the decision on FanDuel is, do you punt off that second powered forward spot with Pascal, or do you get up to Durant? And if you punt it off,
Pascal or Kuzma. Kuzma's
yeah, and
really
you can
cheap on
maybe
FanDuel too.
you when we get there, you can maybe sell me on Kuz a little bit more. But I think
Yeah.
that's the big roster construction decision. And if you punt off there, then you have the money that you can get up at shooting guard, or you could kind of punt off with some of these mid-range guys. So I don't know how much of a priority is Paul George tonight.
I don't know. Dating back to the bubble, our projections have liked Paul George quite a bit, and it was largely disappointing for most of the time that was the case. He's pretty affordable, and this is the thing with like him and KD on FanDuel. They're both pretty cheap for like higher end scoring guys. And so that's one of the reasons I'm pretty confident that like LeBron's going to come in under owned, is because people are going to want to play those two guys. On DraftKings, I think the ownership on PG might be a little bit more in check, just because of kind of positional stuff and builds. But I think he's a pretty good play. Um, I think in general, we saw him and Kawhi played pretty good minutes in the dress rehearsal. I think it was like 17 for Kawhi and 16 and a half for PG, something like that. The usage rates have been pretty steady throughout the course of the preseason. Seeing if I still have it pulled up on one of my 600 tabs that are currently open. But I think he's solid. Like, I know he doesn't feel that way because when the floor hits with Paul George, it's been so ugly, and he leaves such an impression on people, as we've all seen from Doc Rivers quotes throughout the preseason here. But he had in the preseason, he had a 27.3 usage rate. He had a 33.3 assist rate in 3 games. He had the ball in his hands a ton. So I feel a little bit better about him than Kawhi, honestly. Kawhi to me looked a little, I don't know if it was out of shape or unenthusiastic about the preseason or whatever, but I like PG a little bit more than Kawhi based on what I saw in the preseason.
Okay, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. I got stuck playing sheriff on Paul George in my auction draft last night, which I don't know. It's okay. I got him at a good price, but I'd already bought
Yeah.
Dame and who else I get?
AD, right?
Yeah. So I kind of ran out of money really fast, and I missed some really good values in the middle.
Tough to play sheriff when you got two of the high priced guys, man.
I know. I thought he would go in the low 40s. He went for 35. Yeah, somebody's got to do it. Anyway, and then my league fell asleep. We were talking on Zoom, and somebody got Siakam for $10. So it's kind of a disaster of a draft across the board.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I gotta get into this league.
I know it was bad. All right, let's talk about some of the cheaper guys. I mean, Joe Harris is popping up in a lot of lineups on both sides. He's a small forward on FanDuel. How do you think this new Brooklyn Nets roster impacts him? I mean, he's going to get some more open shots, I think.
Yeah.
His usage wasn't really that big to start with. So I don't know. I mean, is it kind of a wash, or is he in a worse spot than last year?
Yeah, he's definitely in a worse spot than last year. Like, you don't add these two usage monsters. But I will note he was generally playing with like one usage monster, because Karis LeVert was kind of like playing that role. So it's not as drastic as you might think. I have docked his usage rate some. The big thing is I've docked his assist rate below what it's been historically, because especially in the bubble, they were running a lot of secondary pick and roll stuff for him, where he'd come off a screen into a pick and then kind of be in a pick and roll with a big. And I don't think they're going to run that stuff. I think he's going to be more of like a straight kind of, not a corner stander entirely, but I think he's going to be more of a straight spot up shooter. And so the good thing is I think his minutes are pretty secure. Like, one of the things you have to realize about their roster and why I'm so concerned about Karis LeVert's minutes short term is because it's very tough to play Kyrie, LeVert, and KD together, because there's only one basketball, and those guys, in terms of where they operate in space on the floor, are all kind of best with the ball in their hands and using kind of the middle of the floor. And so I think Joe Harris is pretty secure in his minutes to approach 30. Like, he's the guy that fits all the different lineup combinations, because he's the guy that spaces the floor and can access and stand kind of anywhere on the floor and get you space. So I think he's really solid from a minutes perspective. I think the rates are a little bit of a concern, but they have been docked. to account for the new cast that he's working with. And so I think he's solid, but he's one of these guys that like that type of play is never is or is rarely going to have an upside that blows you away on the slate, right? He like basically for him to blow you away on the slate, he's just got to shoot the absolute lights out and like get 8 3 attempts and make 6 of them, and then do a bunch of other stuff. Like he's gonna have a hard time hurting you. So if you want to fade him because he's going to be really heavily owned, I think that's totally reasonable because it's hard for him to bury you just with his role in that offense.
I was getting some deja vu back to the restart with potentially punting it off with KCP. I'd rather not do that. I think it's probably okay. At least Danny Green is not in the consideration tonight. Let's talk a little bit about my namesake. Are you concerned about foul trouble? I'm assuming he's going to be guarding Durant a decent amount, so I think that could be an issue. And I don't know. It's going to be a different look with Curry there. I'm kind of optimistic about Wiggins overall in the season.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is the spot though.
I don't think he's like I think he might start a little bit on Durant, but this rotation, remember, like him getting subbed out 5 minutes in or 6 minutes in, that's going to be for Bazemore. I think Bazemore is going to play a lot on
Okay,
KD is going to be my guess.
that's a good point.
And so that second unit where and that's the other thing. If I'm remembering correctly, and I've done so many teams minutes rotations in like the last like day that it's a little bit congested in my mind. But if I'm remembering correctly, Brooklyn did not stagger KD and Kyrie nearly as much in their preseason dress rehearsal. Those guys were kind of on the floor a lot together. And maybe they'll stagger them in the regular season. Maybe it was just building reps during the preseason. But I think you're going to get more of Wiggins against second units. And I like Wiggins against second units. The ball's going to be in his hands a ton. He will probably have to guard Levert, which is its own challenge. So certainly there is some level of foul risk there. But I think Wiggins is in a pretty good spot tonight. I like Wiggins more than Oubre by a decent bit, and I don't know if they're going to be owned somewhat similarly. But I like Wiggins more than Oubre.
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't have a strong lean on that. I do have Oubre ahead in top plays right now. I'm gonna swap them around. And generally, and this is certainly what I do with football. And there's a little bit less time with basketball, but I use these discussions on the show to try and solidify some opinions, and I'll often move stuff around. One thing to note on the top plays, I guess I don't know if you wrote this up, Drew, but our plan is with the projections that we probably won't be updating it past a certain time, right? Because we need to make sure that we're getting the projections updated. Do we ever
Yeah.
decide on a cutoff with that?
So I would say in general, what we'll try to do is if there is news that breaks before an hour before lock that is substantial, and we have the time to like write a note about it and how it shifts things, we will try to do that. But if we don't have the time to like, our priority is going to be on projections first. That's the thing that can help everybody. Then adjusting the table on top plays if we can, and if it's really big and meaningful. But projections is always going to be like your primary source. And what we've tried to do with the top plays article is try to provide context around where the projections are fragile. So situations where like somebody might be popping into a bunch of your lineups and you're like, oh, I read that note in top plays that they're not so sure about this minutes. And that's the type of context we're trying to provide. But I would guess that anything before 6 o'clock, on most nights, 7 o'clock Eastern is lock. We'll be able to get, some updates in there and update stuff. But after that, my guess is like, it really depends on how much news is flowing. Like tomorrow night, 13 game slate, there's probably going to be less like adjustments made to top plays and more adjustments made to the projections to try to like keep everything on pace and updated.
All right, let's keep it moving here. Any comments on these like mid-range or lower, shooting guard? They don't really. No one really stands out to me between Schroeder, Dinwiddie. I guess you can include
I
Blue
like
Will in that
I
conversation.
like Dinwiddie, but I'm also like kind of aggressive on Dinwiddie's minutes relative to Levert right now. But that's the way it was playing in the preseason. Like Dinwiddie played like 15, I think, first half minutes in that preseason dress rehearsal, and so I think he's going to be the facilitator a lot. Like I think they're going to do a lot of things where the ball is in his hands as like a secondary facilitator, and he's the guy that interests me the most. I think he's a pretty good player on the whole. I'm really interested to see how the rotation shake out in terms of how they spread him from KD and Kyrie and have him play with LeVert because they're accustomed to playing together a little bit more. But I think he's the guy of that group that is a little bit interesting to me. Schroeder is the guy just from like the ball's going to be in his hands a ton. There's a lot of usage there, but I don't know. Like I almost prefer if he's not starting and they just like run relentless pick and rolls with him and Montrezl Harrell in the second unit in the Montrezl Harrell revenge game. For those of you out there that aren't aware, Montrez was tweeting after the Luke Kennard extension yesterday with a big okay and a lot of crying faces. So if you're on the narratives, I think the Montrezl Harrell revenge interest is strong tonight.
I like the sound of that. I had not seen that. One other thing that I just will mention, I think if you can get Dinwiddie cheap right now and season long, seems like a pretty good idea. I didn't have time to click on the link today, but maybe you saw it. Drew. There's something going around about Harden chucking balls at people in practice.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
I no, I got Dinwiddie in like the 17th round of my home league last night that I felt really good about, and then Leone and I we just missed out on Dinwiddie late today. He is not. Yeah, if you're like still doing a seasonal draft, he is going really really late. And those guys like Dinwiddie and Levert, I think there's a lot of different outs for them being traded during the season just for a better roster fit. I saw somebody on Twitter in NBA Twitter today talking about how what if Jeremy Grant gets dealt for Karis LeVert like mid-season in the deal that like makes all the sense in the world for both teams, like Detroit getting like a better, younger, higher upside asset, and Brooklyn getting an off-ball defender type piece that helps a little bit.
Yeah, after Jeremy realizes maybe he shouldn't be number one scoring option on a team. Yeah. So anyway, he's probably on a lot of your waivers if you're playing in casual leagues. Was there another point I was going to make there? I don't remember. We hit most of the small forwards. In fact, I think we hit all of them actually. Drew said that he prefers Paul George to Kawhi. I think that's an interesting angle. All right, let's move on to power forward. I think a lot of people have questions about Pascal. The first thing I'd say is, and we kind of hit on this earlier in the show, but remember, as we're entering into this new season, these are different situations. And we saw him smash a lot last year, but it's a different spot. And I don't know. I think there's still room for optimism, but I know personally I had that just in the back of my head, like, oh yeah, Pascal like had all these great games last year, and it's just a different team now. So I don't know. I think he's still a good play. Where are you slotting him in as a play tonight?
Tricky. His usage in the preseason, he didn't play a lot in the preseason, but his usage in the preseason was like 13%.
Yeah.
He had like a 24% usage last year. And it makes all the sense in the world that if he's playing more with Steph Curry, with Andrew Wiggins, with Kelly Oubre, and not, with the depleted roster that they had last year, that the usage is going to take a big hit in that starting role. And so I docked his rates heavily. The minutes I'm unclear on. He played, I guess in the preseason, he played 2 games and he played 19.7 minutes per game in those 2 games. I think he gets up to 20, like upper 20s tonight, but it's certainly possible that those minutes come down to like 25, 26. And then with the combination of low rates, it starts to get to like kind of a questionable play. So I think on FanDuel, where you've got Kuzma as an alternative that's also cheaper, I think Kuzma is probably a better play on FanDuel. Now, Kuzma's projection is a little bit fragile as well because I'm expecting a lot of minutes. I'm expecting Markieff Morris not to be in the rotation, just based on things that they've done. Like Markieff Morris is on a minimum contract. Kyle Kuzma just got a big extension. like the usually follow the money. On DraftKings, where Pascal is really, really cheap, and it's tough to find alternatives that are as cheap as him, he's certainly going to carry a lot of ownership. But the problem is, like, where would you even pivot to? Like, now you're pivoting to guys that, in terms of that around that salary range, you're pivoting to guys that might not play 20 minutes. And there's just not that many guys like that, and maybe that's why people are interested in like Kennard some. I think like Patrick Beverly is a little bit more expensive, is like a better play in tournaments than Pascal. I think he'll be much, much less owned, and I think they have like similar upside profiles for a little bit more money. But things like that to think about on this slate. It's just a tough slate because there's really like the rest of the value pieces. I don't see them getting to 25 minutes, and I feel pretty good that Pascal's going to play at least that 24 to 25 range, and I think he's got the upper bound of like into the 30s.
I think those are fair points. Anthony Davis, I mean, I'm not sure there's a whole lot to be said about him. He's always a great play. You're always worried about him going to the locker room. I think he did have one of those already in the preseason. He's not a top priority for me today. I think he'd be more of a tournament play, but if I'm going there, I'm kind of sold on LeBron, and we talked about that at the very top of the show. If you missed that, you can rewind and listen to it. Anything enlightening to say on Anthony Davis?
Did he look amazing in that last preseason game? Their dress rehearsal, just utterly dominant on both ends of the floor, and just when that guy looks at his best, it's incredible. The note that I'll give on Anthony Davis is he's always been a little bit more effective on a permanent production standpoint playing the five, and he played 0 minutes at the five in the preseason. So I'm projecting 0 minutes at the five for Anthony Davis tonight. And as a result, it takes a little bit of hit on his rebounding rate. But I think that's right early in the season. I think he will certainly play at the five during the season. And I think in the playoffs, they will utilize that quite a bit. But I think as one of the subtle ways to kind of rest or manage their stars, I think you're going to see them playing bigger lineups where these guys can play largely against smaller guys than them. And LeBron and AD are playing against smaller guys who maybe won't take as much wear and tear on them. And I kind of expect that tonight from AD, but certainly immense upside. I think he has a lot more upside than LeBron. I just think the ownership will be tilted in his direction for that.
Yeah, yeah. I've Trez listed twice here. I think I just fixed it. It was a mistake. And I moved. I think DeAndre Jordan. Well, anything else to say on power forward? I think that about covers it.
Yeah, just looking at FanDuel, one guy that you should definitely take a shot on at power forward and GPPs is Jeff Green, just because like they played him a decent amount in that last preseason first half, the dress rehearsal, and they want to play him at the five, and he can be pretty productive on a permanent basis at the five. And the guys that he's going to have to beat out in terms of like getting into optimal lineups in tournaments, Kuzma and Pascal, they're not going to be super efficient per minute producers. And Green could be in the right scenario. We saw that certainly in the bubble with Houston when he played the five some, that he just had some games where, teams didn't want to go out and chase him at the 3-point line, and he knocked everything down. So I think he's a guy that's interesting to keep in mind for tournaments.
Let's talk through DeAndre Jordan a little bit, because people might be surprised to see that he's kind of the guy there at center. I mean, I guess it was just because KD wanted him there. I don't know. I mean, Jared Allen's definitely a better player at this point, but
Yeah.
we've got DeAndre projected for, I believe, 25 minutes, and Allen, I got it right here.
17. I might dock that to 24 and 18, but I mean, look, here's the thing. Jared Allen played like 7 first half minutes in that dress rehearsal game, and DeAndre Jordan played like 13. So DeAndre is clearly ahead of Jared Allen, and he's got this relationship with KD and Kyrie that they love him. And you know why they love him? Dude sets really hard screens. And makes their life easier on offense. And he doesn't need possessions. Like DeAndre Jordan, he came into the league, he wanted the ball a lot down low to be dunking all the time. Now he just wants to set screens and get dimes so he can like pick up the dime off the floor and have his little celebration every time he gets an assist. And that's what he wants to do nowadays. He's a passer. He's always been a good permanent producer because he's very efficient. He does block shots. I think the matchup is, look, man, you get one of these young rookie centers that get asked to be thrown into pick and roll coverage, and they get confused a lot. And so I think Kyrie to DeAndre, I think you're going to get a number of good looks there tonight against Weissman. I'll take his minutes down, probably like a half minute here, just to be a little bit more cautious on DeAndre. But I think he's really, really solid tonight.
Any thoughts on these? We talked about Trez already. What about Zubac or Ibaka or Gasol? They're all I think they're okay to mix in. I wouldn't be too enthused about any of the above, and I don't think I'd be looking at Gasol at all on DraftKings.
He's so Gasol. The thing about Gasol is like he played a lot in the last preseason dress rehearsal. He played, I think it was like 13 first half minutes or something like that. The rates are not going to be good, certainly. But the thing about Gasol is like if you're looking for ways to get away from the cheap guys. Well, I guess on sorry on DraftKings he's 4,700,
Yeah,
so that's like
that's a lot for.
that's pretty impossible to play. I was getting him confused with his FanDuel price at 3,800. I was
Yeah, I think
thinking
he's fine on
3,800.
FanDuel. I got him listed
Yeah,
as the third center on FanDuel. I did not list him on
yeah,
DraftKings.
yeah. I think that's right. I think it's hard. It's hard to envision him having enough upside that even 4,700 matters. Even if you're looking for pivots from Pascal and Batum, because he's costing you more than those guys. And what do you win if you win? If Gasol like hits his ceiling, you're getting like 25,
Yeah.
26. You might win like I don't know. You might win like 8 points or something like that. But I do think he'll be out there a decent bit tonight.
Yeah. And we're mostly out on Weissman. I mean, I think he's going to garner ownership. I just don't see the minutes. I really don't. If that's what gets me tonight, and so be it.
Yeah, there's already a quote while we're recording that Steve Kerr said they're going to play him in short bursts, which this is a quote that he said pretty much all preseason. So like the fact that it's getting reported now, I think it's a nothing thing, but maybe that controls ownership a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, just scrolling back up in the chat here, and I mean Luke Kennard against Batum. As we've talked through it more, and just some of the comments I saw in chat, and some of the questions that people are asking Drew, I wonder if Kennard won't be more owned than Batum, and if that's the case, then I definitely would prefer Batum because we haven't projected for more. Now he's a little bit more expensive, but I'm kind of getting more in on Batum. I'm not sure he's going to be as chalky as I initially thought. Not that he's a great play by any stretch, but if Kennard's chalky, I don't really want any part of that in tournaments. I don't think.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I like Luke Kennard as a player a lot, and people were when he signed the contract extension yesterday. I had some questions on if it changes like his season long projection as well, and I was like, no, I don't. I think this mean like I think you have to understand part of the reason the Clippers paid him is the Clippers have zero way to improve their roster over the next few years, and so yes, they like Luke Kennard, and they went out and traded a piece in Landry Shamet that they liked for him, but they didn't. You know, they're extending him because they have to. He had them over the coals in terms of ways that they can improve their roster going forward. So I found my Clippers notes. He did play 12 first half minutes in the last preseason game, but the last preseason game was confusing. Here were the minutes from the first half of that last preseason game. That was their dress rehearsal. They did not have Serge Ibaka or Marcus Morris in this game. Beverly played a little over 12. Reggie Jackson played 5. It was one rotation, subbed quickly. Lou Williams played 7. Terrence Mann played over 13. Luke Kennard played 12. PG played like 15, 16. Kawhi played 16 and a half. Batum played 20. Zubats played 16. So the Batum 20, like I just don't I don't know what to do with that. And the Lou Williams 7 when Kennard plays 12 is to me that seems like those two guys took up the bulk of kind of like a minutes rotation in terms of those two guys. So I don't know. I might get Luke up to like see if I take Luke up, like I don't know who to pull down because like I'm already kind of projecting Lou on the more aggressive side. It would maybe be him, but that seems silly. Like it seems outrageous that Lou would just play like 20 minutes a night now. But maybe that's what they're going to do.
I have a hard time seeing that.
Luke definitely has more per minute upside than Batum. I have no doubts about that whatsoever. I just have questions on how the minutes get so high without me pulling a lot from Lou, which maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's just like not Lou's time this year.
Could be. You can see all the minutes right here. Caldwell Pope. I mean, he's an okay punt on on FanDuel. DraftKings he costs 4.2. That's a little pricey. He's 3.7 on FanDuel. I mean, whatever. He's fine. You just hope he bangs a handful of open threes. If you stack the game, can you play AD and LeBron together? I think that's fine.
Um, it's fine, but you obviously want one of Kawhi or Paul George on the other side of it,
Yeah, and
right?
that gets a little
Because if
thin.
you're and then you just get a little bit constrained on cost. So I would be leery of it, is what I would say. I would rather pick one of the Lakers guys to hone in on.
Jeff Green or Kennard in big field GPPs.
Um, I think it's Jeff Green based on all the Kennard love we're getting. I think Jeff Green's not going to be owned at all. I think Kennard might end up being 20+% based on the questions that we're getting.
Yep.
And I'm moving Kennard to 22 minutes, so it'll bump him a little bit, but I'm still hesitant. And like the thing is, I've got these 10 Reggie Jackson, Terrence Mann minutes that I don't like really know what to do with, but I think they're playing 10 guys. I don't think they're playing nine. So if they play nine, that's where Luke Kennard's minutes could be much more secure. But they've been talking about playing. There's nine guys that are for sure in the rotation, and then the 10th is matchup based. And so I think that means they're going to play 10 more often than not. And with a veteran roster that they don't want to overextend a lot of these guys, that would make sense. Playing more a deeper rotation than a tighter rotation.
I had a question I was going to throw at you. Now I've lost it. Oh, I guess it wasn't really a question for you. Somebody said, at what point can Batum get there but not need him? I mean, look, I think it's probably unlikely he's going to kill you if you don't have him.
Yeah.
Like, so with that in
Yeah.
mind, that would indicate
Yeah.
maybe he's a decent fade.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the problem is I think most of the cheap guys, their profiles are in a way that it would be hard for them to bury you. Because they're not going to be heavy usage guys. The only guy that's shown a track record for that would be Pascal. But I think the lineups that he's playing in, those are going to be tougher for him to generate that. And so, I think it's going to be hard for any one of these cheap guys to really bury you, which is why if they're all going to be really owned, you might find a way to stumble into a cheaper guy like taking a shot on like a Marquise Chris or someone like that that's been a good points per minute player in his career, and we're just not projecting for many minutes because of the competition. But if we're wrong on the minutes, the per minute production is there. And so like that's a guy I would take shots on in GPPs.
I think Chris is a pretty interesting flyer. Man, if you told me that, 9 months ago that the season would be starting on December 22nd and we'd spend like 10 minutes talking about Batum, I don't know, man. A lot of Batum talk. Batum had not really crossed my radar for probably 2 years before tonight, and here we are. All right, I think we about covered it. I mean, look, it's not that complex of a slate. I would take it easy. The number one thing to remember early in the season with NBA is it is a long, long season, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now, especially with the short turnaround. Like, just take it easy till you feel like you have a good handle, and then you can start ramping up your play. You don't want to get buried big early. You really don't. And I'm playing very small tonight. It's just like this is not a great slate, and I don't see a lot of angles. So play some GPPs, have some fun watching stuff. And that's kind of how I'm going about it. I think you're maybe a little bit of a similar approach as well.
Pretty similar. I mean, 2 game slates are usually slates that I take off or I take a lighter approach to. It's hard on the first day of the season. You really want to fire. You really want to be excited about it. But my overall volume will be down a little bit. Mike Leone, who's watching along, said that there was a question. I don't know if this was on YouTube or Twitter, but he posted in Slack that I saw. What players have you noticed that our projections are most different from others in the industry? I really trust our projections, so would be willing to take more of a stand on those guys. And I guess that's from Prez JB. Hey, I think that is a really good question. Thanks, Mike, for sharing it with me. And Andrew, I guess like you look a little bit more at other things around the industry. I get a little bit of a sense of a feel from what questions I'm being asked, right? And so the sense that I get is I'm more aggressive on Batum than other spots in the industry, and thus he's a guy that like looks like a pretty strong play on a point per dollar basis that allows you to get all the other guys, and he would be one of the guys that I'd mention there. And then I would say I would guess that we're lighter than KD than the industry would be my guess, and those would be the two kind of inflection points that I feel like from some of the questions I've been getting, are there any other guys that you would say we stand out on in terms of relative to the industry?
Yeah, and just the waves from like Batum, then Kennard is liked more. But no, I
Yeah.
don't. Not a lot stood out. I think it was a lot of similar guys were projected, like to hit lineups across the board. So I don't know. Like I said, I was still rebuilding a lot of stuff, so I'll have a better feel for that as we progress through the season. But yeah, that's the thing. I just don't see. And that's why we spend so much time talking about Batum, because I just don't see a lot of, like you said, inflection points on this slate. It's kind of him and
Yeah.
Durant, and I think Durant more so on FanDuel, where I'd probably just play him, and if he's gonna be chalky on DraftKings, I'm not super interested.
Yeah. So I've now got Luke at, it looks like, in terms of projection, um, bear with me 1 minute while many of my Google Sheets load. But it looks like I've got Luke at a projection that is around 15 DraftKings FanDuel points, and I've got Batum around 19. So if Batum's going to be, and this is with me being like more optimistic on Luke at 22, he played 12 first half. I've got Batum at 28, he played 20 first half. Like I'm being a little bit more on the optimistic side on Luke than I am on Batum, and I still have Batum as the better play. So there we have it.
All right, think that's a good place to end it. Open to feedback, guys. If we're doing things a little bit differently than the restart, so if you have ideas or suggestions, don't hesitate to hit us up. We're going to be evolving the product and improving it as the season goes on. I'm pretty excited. Thanks to Drew for putting in tons of time with all these projections and baselines and all these crazy spreadsheets that him and Leone have created that I'm still trying to figure out all the tabs on and everything. But man, it's impressive stuff. So good work, boys. Leone, if you're listening, good work to you too as well. Yeah, good luck, everybody. We will see. I guess the rest of the week, tomorrow is monster slate, 13
Monster
gamer.
slate, yeah.
So we'll be doing a show for that, and then I think for Christmas we're going to do the show. We're going to record it on Christmas Eve sometime. So you have a little bit
Yeah.
of time to digest that. It's an early start on Christmas.
Yeah,
We'll be
you don't have to
updating.
you don't have to hide from your family to watch us while they're unwrapping gifts. You can hide from your family to make your lineups if you want, but we'll have a show out Thursday afternoon. We'll do like a late afternoon live show that'll be up on the site to be able to view at your at when when Santa's dropping down the chimney. You can be reading our stuff and watching our videos.
Yeah, so we won't be doing a show on Christmas morning, but we'll if there's changes, we'll be updating
Yep.
projections. So it's going to be really nice to having projections on the site this year. And there's one of the,
And then Friday we'll have a big, or excuse me, Saturday will be the first big slate that there's no shows on the weekends, but we will have top plays, same type of format, and the projections are always updating. Projections, no matter what, are always updating
until the
So,
last game.
yep.
Yay.